Welcome to the Asbestos Knowledge Empire.
What does asbestos management mean to you?
I used to really struggle with the asbestos management at my site, but now it's a breeze.
It used to be really expensive. I was paying loads, but now I've got my asbestos power team in place. It's so much easier.
Asbestos can be a pain in the arse if not handled right.
We had to stop the job because asbestos was discovered. Now we don't have that problem.
Asbestos management is easier than you think. Asbestos management. Be proactive, not reactive. Think about asbestos first, not last.
And now your hosts, best-selling authors and asbestos experts, Ian Stone and Neil Munro.
Hello and welcome to the Asbestos Knowledge Empire. My name's Neil Munro.
I'm Ian Stone.
And today we're going to talk about asbestos air monitoring. So we're going to cover what it is and when the sort of activities that it supports and when it should be undertaken, and just to give you a bit of background information on that. Okay, so to start with, what actually is asbestos air monitoring?
So air monitoring, they're all one and the same.
Yep.
And essentially they all follow the same process. So a certain amount of air is pulled through a filter and the filter is then mounted and counted by an analyst. Yep. So this is a physical thing. They look at the filter through the microscope and they count different graticules, so different areas on a slide by moving across the slide and then counting the fibres on that slide that they see. One important thing to mention is that for that method of counting fibres, they don't differentiate between asbestos or organic or man-made fibres. It's just if a fibre meets the counting criteria, then it's counted.
Yeah, we're not actually looking for asbestos fibres, we're looking for all fibres, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you've never seen this before, it's hard to probably imagine, but it's basically when you're looking down the microscope and you're seeing a big field and you only count within, it's called like a graticule area, and it looks like a bullseye.
Yeah, target, a shooter's target, like a rifle sight.
Yeah, and the idea is the analyst moves the target around the actual slide and just counts wherever that lands, how many fibres are in that individual target area, and it's the fibre ends we're looking for within that target area. So that's kind of a very layman's process, layman's terms of what we do with fibre counting, etc. So
we could bore you to tears with this, but we're not going to.
And go all technical and stuff like that. So one thing to mention is to actually undertake this air monitoring, you do have to be UCAS accredited.
Yes, that's a legal requirement, isn't it?
Yeah, so you do have to have that accreditation to actually deliver that service. So if you are looking for asbestos air monitoring, go to the UCAS website and look for a company through that portal, because anyone offering air monitoring of that description who's not UCAS accredited is actually breaking the law.
Yeah.
Plain and simply. So there's lots of different activities that can support air monitoring, isn't there? So if we start with the first one, terminology called background air monitoring. So when would we have this carried out? Generally, it's kind of any time, isn't it? Prior to asbestos works, or if you want to get like a snapshot within a building.
Exactly that.
You would have some background air monitoring.
Yeah. So before asbestos removal works is always a good one because it gives you the background ambient fibre levels. And what I mean by that is it gives you the snapshot of what's in the air before anybody's disturbed anything or started. Yeah. Another time when you could have background air monitoring undertaken is during a survey or after a survey's been completed, because again, it's giving you a snapshot of what's in the air after the survey work's been completed.
Well, sometimes clients have this undertaken if they've got maybe some high risk asbestos products that they want to have some ongoing air monitoring just to check that the materials aren't releasing asbestos fibres, just as basically a maintenance sort of activity.
Yeah, just to prove that like their management plan's working and everything is okay. Like we do this in boiler rooms quite a lot. If you've got a high amount of asbestos in there, it might all be encapsulated and everything, but it's kind of real belt and braces approach to prove that everything is safe. Everything is being managed accordingly. Nothing has been disturbed. That's a good example.
Yeah, and another one would be on a retail situation where we've got asbestos insulating board debris within ceiling voids. It's quite common within the retail industry where asbestos insulating board has been damaged within the ceiling void. Now, they don't actually go into the ceiling void, but it's just to give the occupants reassurance that nothing is actually being released into the actual sales area itself, and it is still contained within the void. That's quite common over the years to happen. And it's basically that's a maintenance activity that the client would follow until they've got time to actually refit the store and deal with that situation.
I mean, each air monitoring strategy and element that's undertaken, it links back to what it's called. So all those examples, if you think about it in the core context of background, that is essentially what it is. It's what is in the background.
Yep, definitely. So the next one,
leakage.
Leakage. Okay, so
again,
self-explanatory, isn't it?
Yeah, right. Let's move on. By the term leakage, it essentially is when asbestos removal works are being carried out and undertaken. An analyst will carry out leakage air monitoring in and around the enclosure usually. Again, it's like when the enclosure's up and running, visual checks and visual inspections are undertaken to make sure there's no leaks or holes in it.
Yep.
But again, this is a secondary kind of alarm, if you like, that can highlight issues that you don't always see with your eyes.
Yeah, exactly. Especially enclosures, you can't always see the breaches, and with air, it can escape from anywhere. And with asbestos fibre, you can't see it with the naked eye, and this is a line of defence or a bit of a warning to, if you're having asbestos works carried out, you can pick up whether there has been a breach within the asbestos enclosure.
Yeah, and again, it proves that everything is okay. Yeah. It proves that everything is being carried out satisfactorily. The thing is with asbestos removal, when you think about it, it's demolition. Essentially, it's controlled demolition, but it is demolition to a point because the contractors are generally removing core elements from a building. And with that, I mean, I've been on sites where leakage air monitoring's been carried out and we've identified issues because, I don't know, like the contractor's been removing a bulkhead and then they've opened up the bulkhead, but where they thought it was sealed the other side, it wasn't. And therefore it's kind of exposed that area and that's where it's leaked. So even though they've spotted it and they've sealed it within that enclosure, the air monitoring has picked up that there has been a leak from that enclosure. Yeah,
definitely. Very important. And the target area is definitely with an enclosure. And if you are having licensed works carried out, always the risk points are round near the negative pressure unit because the polythene can be, sucked and it can sort of come loose around the airlocks, bag locks, any sort of point where there is sort of openings within the enclosure that have been sealed, they can come loose. So that's definitely sort of points to sort of raise. And if you have an air monitor done, always look for the analyst to be sort of checking those areas. And if you are having licensed asbestos enclosure works carried out in an occupied building, 100%, I would always recommend that you've got to have leakage air monitoring.
Always, because you need to back it up. You need to show all the will in the world, right? You've got the paperwork of the plan of works from the contractor, the risk assessment, the plan of work that tells you how they're going to remove it, everything's going to be done safely, what equipment they're going to use, what PPE, RPE. However,
if somebody comes to you and says, during those works, I was exposed to asbestos, how do you prove that they weren't?
And you can't unless you've got leakage air monitoring results.
Yeah.
Because if you've got results that show that whilst those works are going on, all by the negative pressure unit, by the airlocks, by the bag locks, by the massive amounts of polythene sheeting, there was no leakage. If you haven't got that proof, you've got
no leg to stand on, really.
No, I mean, all you can do is refer back and say, well, look, we hired in professionals, they were licensed by the HSE, they worked to this plan of work, this risk assessment. However, after all said and done, there's still that question of prove that I wasn't exposed.
Yeah. So the air monitoring's the evidence.
It is, definitely.
Yeah, really important one to consider if you are planning any project like that.
And like you say, I mean, definitely in occupied buildings, I would always 100%. Recommend it.
It's a no-brainer. It is really a no-brainer.
Yeah, exactly that. And even in unoccupied buildings, I would still have it done because, again, that same question can arise from whoever is going into that area afterwards. Best will in the world, you get the 4-stage clearance that passes that area off, but how do I know that the area next to it wasn't contaminated? And these are all questions that we've had over the years.
Yeah.
General public is one. So even if we're working on a site that's completely hoarded off and we're away from the footpath and everything, but the second the general public get wind of asbestos, questions get asked, they get raised. And if you can't prove it, you do have a really hard time trying to prove that everything was done okay.
Exactly that, yeah. What waste certificates and stuff, disposal certificates, they're all good, but it doesn't prove exposure.
No.
Yeah, we have actually had that where we've been on demolition sites and we've had to prove, and with air monitoring, that the surrounding areas haven't been exposed.
We've had to prove it to members of the public, we've had to prove it to members of council, we've had to prove it to journalists that have got involved with asbestos, and it's like, no. It's not like the Wild West. This is being done properly, and here's your proof.
And to be fair, with those results, it cuts it dead.
Yeah, There's no kind of continuation of conversation.
No.
Those are the supporting documents. And then when you've got the air monitoring, it's literally, right, well, there you go. No question. You can't question scientific fact.
No.
And that essentially is what the leakage air testing gives you. It's scientific fact.
Definitely.
Next one, reassurances.
Reassurance. Now, this is an interesting one because, technically speaking, reassurance air monitoring was recommended to be done after licence works.
Mm-hmm.
So, as part of their deconstruction and removal of the enclosure, reassurance air monitoring should be undertaken just to evaluate that by the process of taking down the enclosure, that no asbestos fibre is being released into the air.
It's after the works have been completed. However, it's not fully completed because, like Neil said, the enclosure hasn't been removed. It's not been taken away. This is during that or just after that's been completed. Again, to prove that there was nothing trapped within the polythene, nothing trapped within the enclosure that was missed as part of the removal works or the clearance works. And again, it gives you that final rubber stamp, if you like, to prove that everything is satisfactory.
And it's fit for reoccupation. But sometimes people confuse reassurance, and it has been sometimes used, the incorrect terminologies. Like I've seen sometimes people ask for reassurance to be undertaken while asbestos removal works are being undertaken.
Yes.
So that's not the correct terminology
to
be used.
So clearances, that's a good one to move into.
Yeah. So it's essentially the same test. So the 4-stage clearance, and which we'll probably cover in another podcast, but the actual element of it is the same process.
Yeah, it's stage 3 within the 4-stage process. And it's air monitoring. So after the visual inspection has been completed and the analyst visually sees that the works have been completed satisfactorily, they then put an air test on, or a number of air tests, depending on the size of the enclosure, create disturbance within that area by using brushes and brooms to generate kind of what's going to happen in that area afterwards, to essentially, if there is any asbestos fibres in there, then this is the point that you want to disturb it, because you've got the full enclosure set up around it, therefore it's not going to escape, and you want to highlight it at that point. And if it passes, it means that there isn't asbestos fibre within the counting rules that we count to. The area is safe to then move on to stage 4.
Yeah. And it's exactly the same process of collecting the air sample and amount.
So all those that we've just spoken about, generally speaking, it's 480 litres of air.
Yeah, for a high flow pump.
Yeah, a lot of the industry use there's all sorts now, isn't there? Like you can use different levels to pull that result, but it's most of the industry, it's kind of 480 litres are pulled within an hour.
Yeah.
60 minutes, running at 8 litres a minute. That's generally
the
standard, normal test.
It can be quicker, it can be slower.
Yeah. But it all depends on the lab and what their pumps and their flow meters are calibrated to.
Yes.
Kind of all of that does affect on how quickly an individual lab can run an air test.
Yeah.
So moving on, the final one really, which is personal sampling. Now, personal sampling is done through a low flow, smaller pump. So if you imagine, I don't know, what's the size of a standard pump?
It's probably half a shoebox, maybe.
Yeah, shoebox.
Something like that, generally.
3 or 4 bricks, that kind of
that
size.
sort of size.
That's kind of a high flow pump, which is used for all of the others. And then a personal sampling
is a thick mobile foam.
Very thick, yeah.
But it's that size, isn't it? But just thicker.
Yeah, exactly. But by nature of it being called personal, it is small, so the wearer, the user, can wear it on themselves, or the analyst gives it to contractors. Now, we use personal air monitoring. Again, it's to prove that the work methods are okay. So in asbestos removal, the personal air monitoring is proving that by order of, talking about AIB removal, the contractor that's spraying it down, shadow vacuuming, using manual screwdrivers to unscrew the panels, that kind of thing, it proves that that method is working.
Yeah, it's to evaluate their exposure, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, so like I said, the wearer would wear it for a period of time. Now, usually to get this is usually 4 hours.
Yeah.
So that the operative or whoever's wearing the actual low flow pump and filter would wear it for approximately 4 hours just to get their exposure rate for that 4 hour period.
When that's undertaken, it's not just during the asbestos works.
It's full of standard 4 hours. So whatever they're doing, whether they're getting changed, driving to site, whatever, that 4 hour period is their exposure for that. And that's working to the control limit, which is evaluated over a 4 hour period.
Yeah. And again, that just gives the backup of the working methods. It gives the exposure records of that employee just to prove that everything's safe and it is under the control limit.
Yeah. Can do shorter just to get sort of spikes on
Quick
what they're doing.
snapshots, yeah.
Snapshots of what they're doing, which is really useful, and particularly useful if you're looking, like Ian said, about removal techniques, just to get the actual exposure during that pinpointed activity.
Yeah. We also undertake personal air monitoring when our surveyors do surveys. Again, this is kind of just proving that by order of them doing their works that they're not exposing asbestos or themselves or occupants or whatever. And again, that all goes into our risk assessments and it proves. So again, essentially the air monitoring, it all comes back to proof. And we've had clients say to us before, well, we know you're going to come and do a survey for us.
Yeah.
How do we know that you're not going to expose us? Well, we've got these records that show and prove and highlight that in a similar building on this date, we carried out this survey, and it proves that by what we do.
What we do.
Yeah, exactly. We're competent, and it just proves that we know what we're doing and we're not exposing people or anything. So again, it's just another record.
Yeah, and it's really important for contractors as well. Contractors should have evidence that their work methods and their procedures are adequate for the works that they do. Removal techniques is really important to have the air monitoring evidence that are adequate.
Definitely. And so if there's a new contractor that comes on the block and they're starting out doing works, they pretty much would be having personal air monitoring done on every site.
They should be, definitely.
Because they need to build up a bank of results that prove and show and highlight
that their work methods are adequate.
Exactly that. Whereas when you've been doing it for a while, then you've got that
bank of stuff.
However, every so often, it's just good practice to keep having air monitoring done. And again, it just proves that the actual guys on site are sticking to the work methods that you've prescribed. And it just proves that everything is still okay.
Yeah.
I think that covers pretty much everything about air monitoring.
Yeah, I think so.
Without going into all techie...
But if you do want any technical information, you know where to find us. Join us on our Facebook community page.
Yep.
Okay, that's it for now.
Remember, asbestos first, not last.